Hello, everyone. This is Dennis Bailey, General Counsel for the Alabama Press Association. Today we're going to discuss a major issue for newspapers, and that issue is aggregation. Why is aggregation a major issue? Well, it's a big issue because aggregators usually scrape only the headlines and the leads for individuals who are less likely to read full news stories. A 2014 study conducted by the Media Insight Project found that 60% of people did nothing but read news headlines over the preceding week. And newspaper aggregators are becoming the primary way that individuals get news. Another 2014 study by the American Press Institute found that 51% of those polled reported getting their news in the previous week from online news aggregators. And these news aggregators rarely generate any content. They rely on the work of newspapers that incur the cost of employing journalists. Since the aggregators do not incur that cost, they can make profits on very low margins of advertising. This causes many newspapers to consider aggregators as engaging in unfair competition because they offer up newspaper content without cost. The aggregators claim they are doing newspapers a service by linking readers to their articles and increasing the newspaper's footprint and internet traffic. However, since many individuals only read headlines and leads and don't ever click through to the original source, aggregators appear to be capturing a large part of what used to be advertising income for newspapers. So, a huge question facing most newspapers ever since aggregation began about 10 years ago is whether or not content aggregation is spreading or stealing the news. And where do you draw the line between lawful and unlawful aggregation practices? Well, that line is drawn on whether or not the aggregator's use of newspaper content is a copyright violation. Obviously, copying an entire newspaper article in full resolution photos is a copyright violation. But aggregators aren't that dumb. They normally use only portions of an article and low resolution pictures to try to fall under the fair use exception to the Copyright Act. Fair use is a fact-specific test with many gray areas. The concept of fair use looks at first the purpose and character of the use. For example, is it for educational purposes or for commercial purposes? Does it contain something new or original or transformative? 2, the nature of the copyrighted work. Is it creative artistic work of fiction or is it just a collection of facts? Facts cannot be copyrighted. Third, the amount and substantiality of the portion that was copyrighted and used. Was it the heart of the article that was reproduced or was it just a small portion? And 4, the effect on the market value of the original copyrighted work. Is it damaging the economic viability of the original author? Now, in 2012, the Associated Press sued Meltwater U.S. Holdings in New York federal court. Meltwater operated essentially like an electronic clipping service. For a subscription fee, Meltwater aggregated news of interest to the subscriber. Meltwater was scraping the headlines and leads of AP content and providing a link to the AP source. However, AP claimed that only 0.08% clicked through to the original AP articles from the Meltwater aggregated website. The Associated Press also claimed a hot news appropriation, which is a fairly rare argument that 5 states have recognized, Alabama not being one of them. Meltwater claimed its use of AP content was fair use, as you would have expected. The federal judge in New York in 2013 ruled that Meltwater was infringing upon AP's copyrights. It was the first court to consider whether copying a headline and lead was infringement. The court found that the copying was not fair use. The case was settled after that ruling and never appealed, so we don't have any appellate review of the decision. Unfortunately, there have not been many definitive comments on the question of copying short snippets since Meltwater, as most cases are settled presumably with agreements to pay license fees or to stop using the content from the source. One notable example was the Gatehouse Media versus the New York Times case. That case presented a fact situation much like that which face members of the Alabama Press Association. In that case, the New York Times Boston.com website was scraping content and headlines plus leads from Gatehouse Media local newspapers. The Boston.com website was providing links to the original articles in the Gatehouse publications. During the course of the litigation, Boston.com eventually agreed to stop aggregating Gatehouse sources. That agreement was made to avoid a trial and final decision. I would point out, though, that in Europe, when newspaper groups in several countries got together to try to stop Google News from aggregating their content, the result was that Google News stopped aggregating the content and the newspapers discovered there were tremendously lower numbers of hits on their own websites. But getting back to the question of what is legal and what is not legal under American law, the case law is not at all clear. It is generally believed, however, that headlines are not generally protected under copyright laws unless they are exceptionally creative and not just a statement of fact. Using headlines alone does not infringe copyrights, given that short statements of mere fact are hard to copyright. It is also thought that providing hyperlinks to the original source article would not constitute copyright infringement. Finally, in light of some Ninth Circuit case law, the practice of converting photos to thumbnails in search engines may not be copyright infringement either. So, if you find an aggregator is scraping your headlines and leads without a link to your newspaper, you should consider requesting a takedown notice per 17 U.S.C. section 512C. If a full hyperlink to your paper is provided, you should consider whether the extra traffic you receive is worth the loss in ad revenue due to a failure to click through, and then consult with an attorney about whether you have a potential copyright claim. Hope this has been helpful, and we will talk to you later. Remember to call the APA legal hotline when you have questions or reach us on the internet. The contact information is on this website.